My name is a family name. So my first name is Elettra, and that is my great-grandmother's name on my maternal grandfather's side. And she was a lady who lived in Venice, and my mother always loved her because she was very eccentric, and she had pet monkeys, and she was like the first woman Ferrari car driver, and she was a hoot apparently, and so she named me for her dad after his mother. And then my full name is Elettra Ingrid, and my grandmother's name is Ingrid, so that's my full name. It's the Italian version of the Greek name, so my name is spelled Elettra, and the Greek version is Electra, like Carmen Electra, which is Electra, and Electra means shining one, so I assume it means something similar. I was born in New York at NYU Medical Center by Dr. Katmendi. I grew up in New York City. I grew up for the first 8 years of my life down in Tribeca and in Greenwich Village, and then I switched schools and I had to move to the Upper East Side, which I was very disappointed to do. And then right when we moved uptown, I then decided to change schools again and went to school back downtown. But I've always been kind of a downtown gal, and I have my own apartment downtown again in Greenwich Village. Yeah, I'm definitely a New York gal. I'm at a moment right now where I'm a little bit in excess of New York, but I always say that and then leave and then miss it hugely. So, New York will always be my home for sure. What I love about New York is, well, I notice it the most when I'm gone, is that there's no other city in the world like New York, in the sense that there's always somebody out doing something, always something to see, and it's very friendly. I think that New York has this reputation of being very crass and rude, but I don't have that perception at all. Often when I go out, if I go, grab a beer at a bar by myself, within 10 minutes I have, 10 friends that are sitting at the bar, and that doesn't really happen in many other cities in the world that I've traveled to. So I love that it's very busy, and I love that it's very cosmopolitan, but at the same time, people, we're so full here. It's 12 million people. I mean, everybody has to be nice to everybody else. So I find that often I meet lots of interesting people. I was diagnosed with scoliosis when I was 12. And scoliosis is a curvature of the spine, and most people have a little bit of scoliosis. Mine was just particularly bad because I had 3 curves, and it starts in my neck and it goes all the way down, so my spine is shaped like an S, but the worry was that it was also spiraling like a spiral staircase. So if it gets too bad, your ribs can crush your lungs, and they put me in a back brace that I had to wear for 23 hours a day, every day, for about 6 years. And it wasn't great experience. Obviously, an adolescent girl doesn't really like to have a brace and teeth braces, but I was really lucky. I switched schools. I went to the United Nations school. I had amazing friends, and the UN school is like, everybody's so different. There's 67 languages spoken at that school. Everybody was different in their own way, and nobody ever really was excessively mean to me about it. I think I was the meanest one to myself with that whole experience, but it taught me a lot of amazing things. I mean, I definitely have sympathy for, I love my health. I found that health is like the central kind of pillar of any degree of happiness in life, and I'm stronger for it, so everything turned out okay. My interest growing up, I had no idea. I went to the United Nations school, and I had access to all this great education, and I think I was a little bit spoiled by it. I've always been interested in the environment ever since I was little, but it wasn't, global warming and climate change. I found it very hard to find any kind of mentorship in that area when I was growing up in high school, because I was kind of the only kid that was concerned about it. And it's only been recently that I've really found my path in terms of, the intellectual side of that. But when I was a kid, I think I always felt very kind of overwhelmed by everything that was going on in the world, and I could never really find my place with it. The United Nations, we always had to go to the GA, the General Assembly meetings, and it was like, these people are starving, and there's a war and a civil war here, and I was like so overwhelmed by all of that I couldn't really place my energies towards them. Now that I've grown up a little bit, I've kind of recognized that the environment, climate change, those are my interests, and now I have a way of going about and studying them and trying to help or make a difference, or, at the very least, educate myself. I took ballet when I was maybe 4. I mean, every little girl, I think, in New York does at one point, and I did for about 3 years. But what I did do was I did do gymnastics for a very long time. 3 years about, and in middle school. And I was never very good, but there's definitely a little bit of ballet training that goes with that. So people often say, oh, you look like you're a dancer. And I usually say yes because it's easier to explain. But no, I love dance. I love going to the ballet. Mark Morris is one of my favorite choreographers. But I wish I had danced. In fact, if I ever have a daughter, I will probably force her to dance because it's something that I wish I could do very well, but I never had the discipline. I believe being exposed to so much is also something that happens very naturally in New York City. I mean, you walk down the street and I have no idea how many different people from different countries, different backgrounds, different languages. So I've never felt that New York kids were accused of growing up in a bubble so much. But definitely my exposure at the UN school and my exposure to kids who have come from, very different backgrounds and, don't speak any language, don't speak any English. Sometimes the kids would show up and didn't speak a word of English, and that was definitely a fantastic experience. But at the end of the day, what you learn is that everybody's a human, everybody gets all giggly when they get boyfriends. Everybody's freaked out to grow up. Everybody, even if you're from, I had friends from Rwanda who, you think that they're very different from a New Yorker, but actually at the end of the day, they're not at all. They have the same fears, the same hopes, the same, they love their families, they love their brothers, they like to go out and have a good time. So at the end of the day, you just learn we're all the same. No need to fight. So I speak 3 languages, all not very well. And I learned French when I was very small. I grew up with French nannies until I was about 15. And then I moved to Italy when I was 19 to start modeling. And I didn't speak Italian, but I ended up staying there for 2 years, and I learned Italian just kind of by living. But French and Italian are very similar, so it's not that impressive. And I now hope that I get to learn another language, but I probably am too old to do that now. I started modeling. I went straight out of high school. I got accepted to Boston University, and I went to Boston University for about 2 years, and I hated it. And I had no idea what I wanted to do, and typical freshman year, didn't do anything, probably drank too much beer, didn't go to class, was not happy at all. And then actually, breaking back into Just One Freaking Day, one day I was in my statistics class and I could not figure out why in the world I needed to know this information. And so I decided I'm going to figure out how much money I'm wasting per second being here. So I took my annual tuition and I broke it down, and BU is a very expensive school. And I can't remember what exactly the figure was, but when I realized that per hour I was wasting X amount of my family's money, I got really angry at myself, and I tried to have that motivate me to stay in school, but it didn't really work. So I called my family and said, I want to drop out. And they were like, well, if you drop out, that's fine, but you have to get a job. And I was like, oh. So I started applying to jobs at the UN. I wanted to do internships here and there. And then my family, my mother and father were both models, and they shared an agent, and she contacted Bruce Weber, who's a photographer, and he was doing the new Abercrombie and Fitch catalog, and he asked to see me kind of within that same 2 weeks, which was very lucky. And they casted me for Abercrombie and Fitch, and I went to Miami and I shot it and had a blast and thought that was going to be the end, and I would never do anything like that again. But then I signed with IMG, which is my modeling agency to this day, and they sent me to Milan, and I got 13 shows my first season, and I ended up staying there 2 years rather than 2 weeks. And I just have been working ever since. And I always think that it's going to be my last freaking day in this job, but it seems to keep going and going. So I love it. I'm very lucky. It was very cosmic intervention somehow. Lancome came about, I think, different ways. Obviously my mother was spokesmodel for the brand for many years, so I think people in Lancome were curious about who I was and maybe how I looked and all of that. But Odile Rougeol, who's the CEO of Lancome International, saw ads that I was in for Ferragamo, which was about 4 years ago now. And at the time, they were looking for somebody to be their kind of Asia spokesmodel. They needed somebody, Asia and Europe, so they needed somebody that had a specific look, one of which was very, very pale skin, which I definitely have. So they liked the shape of my eyes, and they liked the fact that I was very, very fair. And when they asked about kind of who I was, it turned out that there was this connection with my mother, and I think they really liked that connection for many reasons, but among which was kind of the idea that, beauty advice and all of these things is passed down amongst generations. I think it's something that many mothers and daughters could relate to. And they asked me if I would want to work with them, and I said, yes, please. It's been a great experience. I absolutely love them. I'm the face of several different lines. I'm the face of Hydrozen, which is international. It's a moisturizer, which I'm wearing today, actually. And I'm also the spokesperson for a lot of different products in Asia that aren't really sold over here, but they're very high UV because Asian women like to stay very fair, so they have very high UV, like 50, 70. I also do a lot of their foundations. I did a mascara, and I do their juicy tubes, a lot of those different juicy tubes. I have about a collection of 500 different juicy tube colors from every single market all over the world. In fact, when I do interviews, sometimes they say, what's your favorite juicy tube color? And I say, I like watermelon. There's one called paparazzi pink, which I think is great, but actually it only exists in Asia, and it doesn't exist, for example, in the UK, so then they have to find a similar one. So it's a completely different, Lancome exists in very different shapes and forms all over the world. I think my favorite, I have a great respect for all the greats, like, the Lagerfelds and the, Gallianos, and, those are obviously the kind of been around for ages, the houses of Dior and Chanel and all that, but I love young designers, and my friends especially, Chris Benz, and I just became affiliated with this young woman named Jen Cao. I loved her stuff, and Yigal Azarel and Rag & Bone. I think that they're kind of the up-and-coming talent, so I'm thrilled to know them and very excited always to see their new collections coming out because I think they're fascinating and beautiful. The most important part of my daily beauty regimen is brushing my teeth and putting on sunscreen. I think the most beautiful woman in the world, I have a huge crush on Linda Evangelista. I don't know if it's important for me to do charity work just kind of for the sake of charity work. That's never the vision I had for myself, but when you learn about something that touches you, well, this is why I love you. So a lot of people ask me why I think it's important to do charity work or why I think it's important to get involved with causes I'm passionate about, but I never really know how to answer that question because I never really set out to myself one morning and said, it's important to do charity work, I'm going to get involved. This specific charity that I've started with my boyfriend and a couple of other friends called Just One Freaking Day is something that we learned about and we found to be easily resolvable, something that we could have a direct impact on, and something that we were very passionate about, which is, questions of human energy and human healthcare. And the steps were just kind of laid out for me to get there. I felt like it wasn't excusable for me to not try at least to do something. But I think it's hard. Charities work is hard. It's complicated, and unless you're very involved with the charity, like I'm very lucky to be involved with Solar Electric Light Fund, who's partnering with us on this venture, basically. But unless you know where the money is going, I understand when people get a little bit freaked out about donating money to, even something like the Red Cross, because it's such a big organization. You don't know where the money's going. You want to do the best possible thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go there. This was one instance where I knew the people, I had direct contact with them. It was not, relatively speaking, that much money to, help build a hospital, and I thought, I'll try to help, and so we threw this initiative together. So we'll see if we hope we get there. So Just One Freaking Day is a website that we created in partnership with Solar Electric Light Fund. And our goal is to provide solar panels for a hospital that is in Burundi, which is a small country right next door to Rwanda, rather. And it's currently, this country has no infrastructure and, for all intents and purposes, no electricity, which means their hospital has no electricity. So we found out that if there's a woman, for example, who's pregnant, about to give birth, she has to walk miles and miles and miles to get to the hospital. And if she gets there at nighttime and she's giving birth at night, the doctors use headlamps to help her give birth rather than having, a lamp or anything. And we just thought that was, in the year 2008, just pretty horrendous. And when we found out that it was $450,000 to provide solar electric energy for 25 years, we decided that was inexcusable not to try. And so I rallied, James, my boyfriend, and I rallied a couple of our friends. We got a website designed. I reached out to some of my designer friends, 6 of them. They designed t-shirts. And so between people's donations on the site, which the idea is to give just one freaking day of your annual salary. And we have a calculator on the website that automatically breaks it down for you. So you just plug in how much you make in a year, and it'll tell you what you make in a day, what you make in an hour. Or if you don't want to do that, we have t-shirts that you might like, or if you don't want to do that, you can donate $5. But it's been going pretty well. We're not at our target yet, but we're definitely getting there pretty quickly. If we get $225,000, we can get one solar panel there, which will provide electricity for 12 hours a day, I believe. And if we get $450,000, we get panels that will provide electricity for the whole day, 24 hours, 7 days a week, rain or shine. A lot of people ask me, why specifically Burundi? It's so far away, it's a small country, and that's absolutely a valid question. But I think Bob Freeling is the man who runs Solar Electric Light Fund, and he's my father's friend from high school. And he gave me this book that was a New York Times bestseller last year called Mountains Beyond Mountains, which was a biography about a doctor named Dr. Paul Farmer. And he's kind of the Jeffrey Sachs of the medical world. He goes into kind of the most rural regions of the world and sets up healthcare and educates the local people on healthcare and disease and disease prevention. He works a lot with the World Health Organization. And I read the book and I was, really inspired. And I also got a glimpse of how much energy issues and health issues are intertwined. And Solar Electric Light Fund is partnering with Paul Farmer's group that's called Partners in Health. And this was one of their first projects, that they're building solar electric hospitals in Africa, which is great because a lot of times African countries, as we all know, are quite poor, and so they lack infrastructure. So, infrastructure means roads, means lights, means electric grids, and these are all things that I think, especially in America and Europe, we take totally for granted. But if you don't have the road, you don't get the supplies to build the hospital, to get the grids, to get this. So if you can provide a strategy of energy independence, you can actually impact a lot of people's lives. And that's what Solar Electric Light Funds and Partners in Health's partnership has to do with. And so their first project is in Burundi because there's currently 60,000 people in that country that have no access to healthcare, no access to electricity. And I have heard of dire situations, but that was one that I found to be particularly egregious. And so I decided that I wanted to try to help, also because I want an excuse to meet Paul Farmer. So it's quite selfish, really.